So, by thanking you for, taking the time out of your schedule to chat all things Superhost. Um, Now, your previous films, Stillborn and Zed, are sort of what I would term parental horrors, whereas Superhost is very different. What prompted that sort of shift in tone?
I mean, I think a big part of it was just trying to not tie myself together with being the guy that makes movies that scare moms, like I'm always kind of putting these moms in these horrible predicaments, and it's a ton of fun. You get to work with great actors, and they're you're putting them through hell. But I thought it would be fun to just try and go the opposite direction and do something with a little bit more humor, which, I feel like is a bit more me than doing that really dark and depressing stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a conscious decision to try and just sort of step outside of this comfort zone that I was in and do something a little bit different. And when I saw the movie Creep, I was just like blown away by Mark's performance of Joseph, just being like this lovable, affable, complete psychopath. And I was just like, that would be really fun to come up with something like that, like a character that at the beginning is this weirdo, but as the movie progresses, you sort of fall in love with them. And even though they're doing these horrible things, they're just having so much fun with the role that you can't help but just be attracted to them, just like you want to see them do well because they're so fun to watch. So that, having those two things were big kind of inspirations for Superhost too, just to try and, do something fun and, create a lovable character that is just like a total menace.
And obviously, having done so many sort of, serious, sort of, I guess, more traditional horrors, did you find it easier or harder to then, tap into that sort of dark vein of comedy that this film has?
It's definitely different. I mean, I definitely like to have fun when I'm shooting things like that. So, I'm trying to create these bonds with actors and just trying to get to that place. So it was fun to spend most of the time just sort of looking for jokes or a lighter way to approach a scene, because when you're doing something that's like a night shoot and you're doing overnights all the time, it's really draining mentally just to be constantly like, telling this actor to do something that's, putting them outside of their comfort zone too. Like, oh, you're terrified. There's something in the house. How are you reacting? You're doing all these things like, oh, there's a demon, and like all those things that just sort of put them into a place where they have to react, accordingly. And in Superhost, there's like one scene like that when Osric, Teddy goes down to check the alarm. That's really like the only dark scene in the whole film. The rest of it takes place during daytime. So yeah, it was fun just to sort of allow the characters to find different avenues to sort of perform and not be so focused on like, okay, your eyes have to be huge. You can't blink here because if you blink, that takes the audience away from that moment. So that was definitely a lot of fun. And in my new film, there was a lot more of that, like a lot of that really dark genre work that it's still super fun. It's just totally different.
And since you played, I think it was in Grave Encounters 2, you played a vlogger. Since then, they've become much more of a common protagonist. They sort of replaced the old author writer. What do you think it is about these types of characters that's so interesting to filmmakers?
I don't know. I think they're just everywhere right now. It's just a whole subculture that's just blown up, and it's such a huge thing. And it's just such a varied place that you can find literally anything. You can replace an entire college program just by going on to YouTube and just, finding a professor, something like that. It's just amazing how there's so much good and so much to be learned on YouTube and these different platforms that we didn't have, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even. It's just become like its own ecosystem that I think people can draw from. And I think that with that, there's also all these subsections of people that me personally, I don't really understand, like the just sort of the lifestyle vlogging where you're just sort of projecting this person, it's a very Kardashian lifestyle, and you're just sort of putting that out there and people watch it and they love it because I think it's a form of escapism. But yeah, just there's definitely good and there's definitely some bad in that whole thing. And so I think kind of poking fun a little bit at the people that take it a little bit too seriously and they kind of project that sort of confidence and everything that they don't really have. You're just, I think social media in general, just Facebook, Instagram, all these things, you're seeing everybody at their best. And so it's almost like in a new American Beauty type setup where it's like, well, what's really happening behind, after they say cut, like how are these people in real life? And I think that we don't really get an opportunity to see that very often. So that was kind of fun to play with too.
And a lot of times in these sort of stories, it would be the male character that's the, you know, the more driven, the more pushier, the more obsessive. But here, it's, you know, it's Claire that's more, you know,
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, oh my God, you know, we need more followers, we need to be more productive. You know, why did you decide to sort of, you know, spin that convention on its head?
I don't know. It was just one of those things that just felt right. I mean, I was talking to Sarah and Osric really early on when I was writing it. So, I mean, Osric's definitely a very, he's a softer kind of guy. He's very pleasant, very, so there wasn't much writing, you know, I was really writing to their strengths. Like Sarah's very confident. She's very independent, all these things that I met her working on Z, and I just sort of picked up these traits of hers. And it just felt like it was more them to fall into these characters rather than, you know, just flipping them just to be you know, a conservative with how they're kind of portrayed. So it was just partially like I thought it was interesting to have her kind of lead the way, because it gives you these opportunities, like when she tells Osric to go down and check the alarm, like she's really the alpha of the group. She should be the one going down because of that. But I think that there's still these archetypes that they're existing in. It's expected for him to go. So it just kind of turns into that. And, you know, it ends up with him not quite being the hero that he wants to portray himself as at the end. And, you know, it all kind of crumbles around that. But, you know, ultimately, it's just about a couple that doesn't communicate very well because they're so focused on communicating with people they can't see.
I know that Stephen King was quite a strong presence when you were growing up. I think Rebecca to me is almost a mix of Pennywise and like Annie Wilkes. You know, how much of that was in the script and how much of that was what Gracie brought to the part?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was tapping into Pennywise in a couple of scenes. There was, even just in the direction that I'd give her, was the scene where she's at the window and she walks slowly around the edge. It was kind of like, you know, you're hungry, they're trapped, you're just playing with your food at this point. Like that was kind of the direction given. And then the other moment later, when Osric falls down the stairs and she comes out of the deck, like underneath the deck, and she's like, "Hi, Teddy." Like that was very Pennywise influenced. In chapter 1, there's a scene where Pennywise he's like gnawing on a little kid's arm and he waves with the arm. And that was 100%. I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to capture, that kind of like insane kind of just this juxtaposition of what's happening. You've got a guy bleeding out. You've got this childlike wonder coming out of the other characters. So I definitely think that that Pennywise was a big inspiration. I've heard Annie Wilkes a lot, which is interesting. I never really thought about that, but I'm sure, you know, Gracie did a lot of work with the character and just trying to find it and everything like that. So I think she probably tapped into that quite a bit too.
And, you know, you work with, you know, horror royalty, you know, Barbara Crampton, you know, she's the cheerleader of indie genre films. You know, what does she bring to a production?
She brings just a ton of stuff, like enthusiasm for one, which is just hard to match when you've got someone of that caliber, you know. Like I've worked with the Michael Ironside, Stephen McCaddy, Barbara Crampton was kind of the third in that horror icon. And it was really fun just to see she just how passionate she is about making these things. Like it's not just like a little paycheck, because she was not paid very much. It was just, she loves to do it. She loves the process and everything. Like we were we're in the forest and we're getting her all bloody and everything like that. And I think that there's always just a little bit of hesitancy from my end, just to be like, how far can I push them before they start to push back? But there was no pushback. You know, I'm like, okay, let's put a little bit of blood. She's like, give me more blood. Throws the blood in her mouth. She's just 100% down to get dirty, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't know, you know, and so now, you know, we've become good friends and we talk all the time. And the post stuff, like after the films come out, like she just shares so much stuff, and she becomes like a one-man PR team for the film. And it's just like, you know, you can't. It's not something money can buy. It's just this like an intangible thing that she adds to the production, from the experience of making it to the actual release, that it's just kind of like, she just loves to do it. She loves to support it. And she loves to just sort of put that out into the world, that she's this person. So, I mean, you know, a lot of people I think you meet, they're never as cool as you want them to be. Barbara totally is.
Yeah. I've met her many times, and she's very lovely. I think the crew, I think combined cast and crew was like under 15 people. I guess partially COVID, but also the, you know, the sort of production that this was. You know, what advantages does that smaller crew give you?
14 was the most we ever had, and that was on the big forest day, and that included cast. So we added an extra makeup person to help on that day, but in general it was about 12 people, which is absurdly small. The advantage is, I mean, the disadvantage is just it limits the kind of amount you can play with the cinematography. Like your setups have to be pretty simple because you only have two people doing the lighting and the grip stuff. So I do think that you move really fast, which was really nice. Like when you know that you're kind of limited by what you can go after, you keep things very kind of small and intimate, and you're able to just spend more time with the actors and spend more time doing takes. Like I just did a film and it had a big crew, like, nearly 40 people. And the pace is just so much slower that I was so used to Superhost and that speed that it's really hard sometimes to get everything you need because you're waiting, you've got to move these lights and everything's kind of moving and it just slows everything down. So having that flexibility where you're using more natural light, you're just bouncing around a little bit quicker. It allows you to kind of be creative, not with the way you shoot it, but with the way you direct the actors. You allow them to play a bit more and you're giving them time. And that's really the most important thing. Like when you're editing a film, you want to have options and you want to be able to create the story later as well. So being small, it allows you to be really nimble. And that was really fun. And it's definitely something I would want to do again.
And it must help as well that, your producer Curtis is a director himself. So it must really help having somebody in that supportive role who knows exactly what you're going through.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's, Kurt and I are super close now and working on all of our projects together and stuff like that. And he's a great person that if you're stuck in a scene, you can just kind of go, hey, Kurt, what do you think about this? And it's not like a possessive thing where like, well, I would do this. It's just like, he'll just throw something out there and it might spawn an idea that lends to, goes to somewhere else. And that's super powerful to have that kind of, relationship where there's no ego involved. You're just asking because that they're sort of seeing it from a wider view, and they're not just sort of, when you're directing, you're so far into the weeds, you're just like seeing every little detail. You sometimes forget to step back and just sort of look, what is this scene actually accomplishing? And so having someone like Curtis standing back, you can just say, hey, Kurt, what is this? And it's just like really clear for him because he can just be like, oh, well, this scene's about this, focus on this, not that, so that's definitely a really powerful thing to have with you on set.
And you've mentioned it a few times, but you've been hard at work on, I think it's Let It Lie is the name that you're working with at the moment. Is there anything that you can share about that production?
Yeah, we shot in Buffalo, New York. I just got back early March. I was there for 7 weeks, which was a new thing for me. I've never been gone longer than a few weeks away from my family, so that was tough. But it's it definitely is a bigger film for me, like budget wise, everything. The cast is much larger. It's kind of like a Final Destination college campus supernatural thriller type of thing, which is, completely different from what I've done before. And it was a learning experience to work with. You've got a main cast of 5 kids and just sort of building those relationships and crafting their performances and stuff like that. From some of them hadn't done a lot of work, but they were, they had good tapes or anything like that. So just really kind of becoming friends with these kids and allowing them to sort of play with these characters and stuff like that. That was a big, it was a ton of fun. And then we have other actors that came in for smaller roles, and it was just the scope of the film is so much bigger than anything I've done before, which was a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I've loved everything that you've cooked up previously, so I look forward to seeing it.
Cool. Should be out later this year.
Fingers crossed. Well, thank you, and I wish you best of luck with the film.